Awesome. Well, let's get started. It's Thursday. In case anybody has lost track of what day it is, I certainly have, but I definitely know it's Thursday because there are only less than four more days of this year's virtual By the People and Monochrome Art Fair. My name is Nicole Dowd. I am the Director of Arts Programs here at Halcyon. And I'm so pleased to welcome you back for what is going to be an incredible program today as we visit with 8 DC artists who are participating in this year's fair. This virtual exhibition, which launched almost 2 weeks ago, has brought together almost 500 works of art from 109 artists from across the DC, Maryland, and Virginia regions. The fair closes on July 12th, which is this Sunday. So we're super excited for these last few days of artist talks to really gain some insight about some of the artists and their work on exhibit, how things are produced, how COVID is affecting their practices. Nina O'Neill, who is the curator of this art fair and the founder of Monochrome Collective, is actually out around town making some local non-contact deliveries. So if you see a work that you love on the site or today in someone's studio, and if you live in the local delivery range, don't sleep on this artwork because you only have until Sunday to get a unique, locally created artwork into your collections. Before we dive in today, I want to talk a bit about today's flow. Like I said, we'll be hearing from 8 DC artists today, some of which will be in their homes or their studios in DC, and a couple who are actually currently traveling and will be zooming in from across the country. So very, very exciting stuff. Along the bottom of your screen, of course, you'll notice there are some buttons regarding your mic and your camera. You can turn those on and off. Your mics are actually automatically muted, and we ask you to keep them muted so that we can hear today's artists in the best way possible. It was also great to have your Zoom in speaker view so that you can see the artist presentations as well as any of the materials that they'll be sharing today. Each studio visit will be about 15 minutes long, and we welcome questions throughout. And you'll see there is a chat button at the bottom of your screen as well. And if you think of a question for an artist or about the fair overall, or if you're having technical difficulties, feel free to pop any questions in the chat and we will get those to the right people. Lastly, this is the last kind of big public event that we're having for the art fair, other than some Instagram talks that are happening tomorrow. So as many of you know, in June, we postponed the opening of the fair as we were really reflecting on how to give space for the grief that this nation was expressing over the killing of George Floyd, as well as longstanding continued injustices against Black communities. In June, we consulted with many of the artists who are participating in the exhibition and came to the conclusion that the original mission of the fair, which was to support DMV artists contending with the many challenges of the pandemic, was still a worthwhile mission, but that we could also use this platform to create some additional impact. And so throughout today and throughout the fair over the last couple of weeks, but especially at some of these public events, we're collecting donations for National Bailout. They're a nonprofit who are doing some important work around ending racist systems of pre-trial detention and helping families stay together by fighting against mass incarceration. We will pop their website in the chat so you can learn more about the work that they're doing, and following that, we'll post the link so that you can donate through the Art Fair website. And we really, really appreciate everyone's support up until now. So now I am super thrilled to jump right into today's studio visits. First up, we have Clarence James, and I'll just tell you a little bit about Clarence before we visit with him. He holds a degree from Howard University right here in DC. He began producing artwork and submitting work to shows immediately upon finishing university, and has spent the past 5 years building a following nationwide. He's lived and worked, exhibited, done shows and fairs, painted murals, organized events, and created experiences right here in DC, in New York, in LA, and in Miami. And he currently works out of his studio at the historic 52 O Street Studios. CJ, are you at 52O today?
Yes, we are at 52O today, right now, in my studio. So we've been here for about 3 months now, and it's great.
So take us around your space. It looks really, really incredible.
Okay, we can move around a bit. All right, okay. This is like my little desk setup that I'm sitting in right now. So you can see, I got just a little table here, right? All right, good windows, good light, very important, keeps me inspired. Okay, on this back wall, you can see I'm just writing straight on the wall. It's my studio, and that's how my brain works. We'll get into things like that. Our brains don't work linearly, so it's important to make mind maps, and that's what this is. And then over here we have, another portion of the atelier, right? You can shop some clothing items there. And then I use this wall as a gallery wall, and right now it's hanging a current collection. It's really cool. I was trying to get closer, so I had put this in here, but we can go close for a second. See, these are very nice, and we were gonna have they were going to be at Maquetto on 8th Street, and then COVID happened 2 days later after we put it in. And so there'll be a different situation with that, and I'll let everyone know about that. But, this is basically the space. And so, here's a long view of, we have a good amount of space. And so this is really awesome because this is part of what I want to let y'all know too. You're tuning in the middle of a really awesome part of my artistic journey where I got in this building in January, and I had a small space with no windows, but I was very grateful, and it was awesome. And coming from where I had previously been with making art and not having a studio and not having some of these infrastructural things that are really important, now I have that, and we can all enjoy it.
Yeah, your windows and those brick walls are giving me such life.
Yeah,
they're really, really incredible. So I guess tell us a little bit more about your overall practice. And I know you have some really awesome work in the show, and I want to dive into your process and some of the thinking behind those works. But then also what is a typical day for you as an artist?
Okay. All right. So a typical day is get here 9 or 10 and be here till 9 or 10. So step one is this commitment to work ethic that I have going on, which is very helpful. It's really hard to do that without having structure. So upon getting this studio, I was able to immediately apply a lot of things that I knew were important, but just didn't have the support for that. So I try to get in early, of course I eat and such, and it's ideas come really heavy in the morning for me. I'm definitely a morning person. So I try to get in and turn a podcast on, turn some music on or something, light some incense maybe, try to just take in things for 30 minutes, an hour. And of course, I have a list of things that I want to get done every day. And there's emails to respond to, and there's certain strategies I'm trying to accomplish that have been growing my artwork, and so I try to stick to those. So that's a big thing. Kind of like I was hinting at before, the style of my art, if you can tell, this is a newer piece I've done recently, right? And it has a lot of spray paint, acrylic paint, roughness, texture. It's abstract and it's symbolic. And one of the terms I like to focus on is ideographic, because that's what hieroglyphics are. Essentially, a symbol containing way more than words can just put on the idea, or it's really an experience. So that's kind of the immediate ways that we get to work, me in my brain, us, we get to work listening to things, taking in information. It's really important to take in information. So that would be my step one. Step one, information, whether that's formal research that I'm trying to do, trying to make a project, get across a specific message. In general, I kind of created a brand I called Pavement, and I tag 84 everywhere, because these are two of the beginning ideas. They're two just curiosities, right? The 84 comes from the Orwell book, and it's just a concept of seeing yourself in context of society and being an active person in society, right? Really trying to understand the underlying causes of things and how you can, try to get this a concept we have of pursuit of happiness and freedom and stuff. How do we really get to that? So you got to be aware of inherent structures, inherent human natures. And there's lots of books and stuff about this thing, what people do with power. I think it was the Stanford study or something they did where they study, it's basically, you give people unchecked power and they're going to abuse it type thing. So living in a society the way we do, we've created structures that what's up, bro? We've created structures that keep it going and working for us, but we have to constantly be at work maintaining those and improving them and reforming them. And especially we're in a time right now where that's super important. So these are kind of like the ideas going through my head, right? And so the artwork is kind of an expression of that. And so I try to come in, and whether it's putting ideas like the piece I just showed you, or there's a piece over here I could show you in a second, or I'll just show you right now real quick since we're allowed to move. I didn't know we were allowed to move.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
seeing your
I don't know
space.
if you can see it too well, but you know, you get some of the what is semiotics going on, right? These symbols together just kind of like create a thought pattern, and gives everyone some things to be inquisitive about and thoughtful about. And the theme is what I just highlighted mostly.
So
So
the work that you're doing now in your studio is like super vibrant, very like graphically oriented.
mhm.
It is in somewhat of a contrast to the work that you're presenting in the show. Can you talk about, some of like the monochromatic choices? And I know that, the work in the show that's, on the other side of your wall is it's also spray paint and acrylic, and some of the techniques are very similar, but it feels like, a little like less structural. So talk a little bit about like the work in this exhibition.
Okay, awesome. So like the piece behind me is more of what's in the exhibition, and these pieces on the wall over here, maybe we just like have these showing while we talk about them. So these pieces right here come from a really important like idea that I want people to really understand about artists themselves and what we're trying to do, right? So I'm trying to basically express myself, right? Part of art for me is catharsis, honestly. It's therapeutic. And so I have to, suppressing my emotions and ideas hasn't worked well for me. So when I start getting them out, that works really well, right? And this is an example of that. Like these pieces are an expansion of my art practice. So the idea is I don't want to feel limited to just one type of style because I'm exploring. And when people begin to appreciate like the total body of work, they'll understand the journey. And so at this point in time, and with this series, these are they're abstract, like totally ambiguous to the viewer, and it's really about you. You complete the art piece with your perspective and with your understanding of it. So that's a really important thing. For me, what happened is it was kind of like a snapshot of like my subconscious in a way. So what, and it was a technique that I developed over time and over studio practice. So I use like a brush and a roller and acrylic paint in a kind of unique way that creates pattern. At the same time, it creates really nice texture that kind of shows you kind of the journey of paint across the canvas, right? Like as you fill the space with color, what happens, right? And so I based it off of these Rorschach tests that, like they give you the image and it's like, how do you feel? And I think that was interesting to me when I learned about that and read about that. You know, like I heard about it, of course, a long time ago as your kid, you see it, whatever. But when I really looked into it and what they were trying to do, it's essentially trying to extrapolate data over people's responses to prompts that are ambiguous. So you can't come into it with a preset anything. It's actually just going to show you your mindset and your disposition. So I think that's a really interesting thing. And in the short time, and I see we're coming up on time, 15 minutes goes quick. That's kind of the main idea I want to get across, that the way I'm expressing artwork is to engage my audience so that we can be thoughtful, so that we can kind of build a train of thought towards kind of like a higher plane, right? Because it's a higher plane. When George Floyd happens nationally and globally, it takes us collectively to a higher understanding. We now clearly see something that we live with every day that we know we have to do something about. That's an enlightened perspective. So kind of just in conclusion, I'm trying to kind of build that within people. And I feel like it's really powerful to anytime someone comes and sees the work, buys the work, sees me at a show, talks to me, I really enjoy like getting them to express themselves, because I feel like the more communication and dialogue and discourse, the better.
I love learning more about the kind of like Rorschach inspiration behind the work because, you know, it is, I think it's really, really incredibly poetic in a way because, you know, when someone hangs that in their home, then what they're sort of seeing in it becomes a reflection on themselves as well. And the piece has like a life beyond the studio, which, you know, that's, I think that's what everyone really aspires to, you know, like having that personal individual connection to the work. So yeah, I love learning more about it. I love seeing your space. Hopefully when we're allowed to leave the house and come back and visit with people, we'll be able to come and visit because 520 is a really, really special place to work.
Yes, please
But
come visit. Please come visit. And yes, this is a special place. Historic artists have been making art out of here for a long time.
yes,
All
so
right.
DC, so DC,
Very
520
deep.
Street. Awesome. Well, CJ, thank you so much. We're going to post a link to your page in the chat as well as your Instagram. Give him a follow and we will see you very soon. Thank you so
All
much
right.
for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank
All
you.
right. Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, 15 minutes just go by super, super fast. So next we're just going to roll right into another awesome DC artist who is not currently in DC, but it is really, I'm really excited who'll be joining us. So Charles Jean-Pierre, he is a Haitian American artist and an adjunct professor. He is also a U.S. State Department of Art and Embassies artist, which is really exciting. I'd love to learn more about that. He's participated in Smithsonian exhibitions, been invited to the White House to speak on the role of arts in youth justice, recently exhibited at the IMF, Inter-American Development Bank, and is in the Permanent Connect collection in Benin and Niger, West Africa. So he has also created public art around the world from New York to Istanbul, to Panama, to Port-au-Prince, to Pretoria, London, and Paris. JP began experimenting with art at a really young age and created visual narratives based on classical paintings from his homeland, which is Haiti. His work speaks to the nexus of political, social, and economic structures. And he also is a graduate of Howard University. Hey, JP, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going? Nice to see everybody out there.
Nice to see you. You're in Chicago?
I'm right outside of Chicago. This is one of my 140-foot murals I'm planning restoring. So I brought you guys to my outdoor studio.
This is awesome.
So this piece is called I Too Sing America, and it's a picture of a young black man or boy and a young black girl. He's playing a harmonica. Can you guys see that? And she's playing a classical instrument, the violin. I started out, I grew up here. This is like 17 blocks away from Chicago. Technically, it's a suburb, but real rough, like a Flint, Michigan type of situation. I created this mural in 2013. They flew me out, and 7 years later, my response to everything that's going on as far as injustices and things of that sort, we're going to restore this mural. So I'm in Chicago right now doing the planning work. We're going to redo the background. This is an area that has a lot of gang violence. I know Chicago South Side is known for that nationwide. But as you can see, there's no graffiti on the mural. So in 7 years, not one piece of graffiti on this mural. That's something that I'm really proud of and take pride in. My bio, I need to update it because it says that my artwork deals with the nexus of social, political, and what was the last part, Nicole?
Social, political, and economic structures.
Economic structures. So I have a master's, in addition to studying art at Howard, I have a master's in sociology. But I think my bio now and the current work that's in the By the People exhibition is basically about people, place, and memory. So it's still a nexus, but I think it's more simplified and more straight to the point. And what I mean by that is, as a person, I identify as a Black man. I also identify as a Haitian man. I also identify as a Caribbean man. I also identify as an indigenous man. And what I believe indigenous means is that I have a history that supersedes colonialism. I practice and study indigenous religion from my homeland. Most people understand it as voodoo, but it's a science and it's a mystery system, and that element or that magic, I think, is something that ties us to our indigeneity and ties us to our freedom, liberation, and prosperity. Do you have any questions, or do you want to
Do
see?
you do you want me to show? Do you want me to pull up your slide deck so that people can see the work that's in the show?
Please do. I'll get in the
Yeah.
show, and then we can talk about the work in the show. So the work in the
Awesome.
show is about people, place, and memory.
Well, and I think it's really bios are so funny, right? Because like they are constantly, they sort of mark a very particular point in time, right? And so they're always evolving. As you, as an artist, as a human, as we as a society are evolving, it's very, very telling. So I appreciate that update. But yeah, let's dive into some of the work that's in the show, and then specifically this body of work that you have.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So you can skip this slide. Keep going. Keep going. I'm also in 52 O Street as well. My main studio in DC is in Stable. I'm proud about Stable. I want to shout Stable out. 30 great artists from all different backgrounds, really diverse, that are working. We've been in there for a year. I'm excited about that. I have a small little art gallery where I feature Haitian artwork and South African artwork. And so when all of this is said and done, I'm inviting everybody over to Stable to check out what we have. You can keep going, Nicole. So people, keep going. All right, this isn't in the show, keep going. So all of these were in the IDB show. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. So it looks like I have more of the play. Oh, this piece is in the show. So what I did was, I read 12. So the IDB asked me to create a body of work centered on people of African descent from the Caribbean and Latin America. And so that covered like the people in place. And the last thing was the memory. So I took 12 books, 6 of them written by women from Latin American and Caribbean, and 6 of them from men. One of them being my grandfather, who wrote a book called A Time That Passes, in French, Les Heures Fanées. But The Fire and High was a really good book about a Puerto Rican African-American girl in Philly that loved to cook. And this was one of the 12 pieces. This is a collage piece. I used fabric from Haiti. I went down to Haiti for right after Christmas through the first week of the year. And I sourced these materials, this fabric, this lace, and used that to create the fabric for the dress of the girl. And then the monoprints, her body, are created from collage monoprints that I create with my father, or created with my father. He has dementia and Parkinson's, and when I go home to Dallas, I work on these monoprint fabrics where we, it's a process where we lay down the paint and then put a second canvas on top and then press them out. He can't talk anymore, but he can still do the pressing process. So it's a way for me to make memories with him. His father was a fabric dealer in Haiti, and I wanted to tie that connection to my roots and my family in these pieces. So all of these pieces either have fabric found from somewhere in the diaspora or fabrics that were made myself with my dad. You can keep going. All right, so we're into place.
Those works are so intimate, JP. Like, I'm going to go back up for 1 second because they're so, like, you can definitely, I know it's so hard to sort of convey some of this in a 2-dimensional image, and like that's why I wish that we could visit your studio, which we will eventually. but yeah, like here, like the your story behind it and that sort of intimacy and vulnerability that is in these is, I think really, like the more I look at it, the more and more it comes through. So, you know, for everybody out there who wants to spend some more time looking at these, like definitely go to JP's website or his page on the By the People site, because they are really so beautiful and so special. But yeah, I'm interested to kind of like to learn more about, you know, where this, like the works in place that then tell a different, you know, but similar element of your personal narrative as well.
Yeah, so my mom's Haiti is not my Haiti, my personal Haiti. So like I know contemporary Haiti. I like go to nightclubs in Haiti and go to the beach and know like democratic Haiti. Like my mom grew up under a dictatorship, and she left because of that dictatorship. And she has a very different relationship with Haiti, our respective homelands, and it's because of time. And she believes that I don't even know, I don't know her Haiti, and she doesn't know my Haiti, right? But it's the same place, it's the same location, it's the same people. I think over 60% of Haitians are under the age of 20.
Wow.
I'll say that one more time.
Wow.
60% of Haitians are under the age of 20. So there's like, there's a whole new Haiti. There's a whole new Harvey. I grew up in this area on the south side of Chicago in the 90s. As you can see, the grass hasn't been cut here. This is a really rough area. I probably don't even know the people that live in this area anymore, because, are we still there?
Still there.
I probably don't even know the people that live in this area anymore, because there's so much movement and transition with gentrification and hyper ghettoization and things of that sort. So it's important for me to make memories in places. That's why I travel so much. If I wasn't in Chicago right now and there wasn't COVID, I would probably be in South Africa right now, on a DC International Sister Cities grant, working in Pretoria. So place is important to me. And what I try to do is describe place, capture place. All of these monoprinted pieces inside of this work is either hand cut or hand painted in place specifically. So Future Memories 1 was inspired by my grandfather's work that was talking about time that passed. I was born in 1983. My grandfather died in 1982. So all the memories I have of my grandfather are in this book that he left and dedicated to his kids and his grandkids. And so I'm working on a project and translating that project from French to English, so that his grandkids or great grandkids could be able to read it and experience it. You can go to the next slide. Future Memories 2 is based off of Future Memories 1 in the same style. I think it's easier for Caribbeans that grew up in America to identify as Caribbean than it is for, say, Haitians or Jamaicans. So if like you're born and raised in Jamaica, you're gonna say you're Jamaican before you identify as Caribbean. And so I wanted to delve into the Caribbean identity. So I did some research on like the most famous iconic Caribbean person there is, Bob Marley. And so I read a brief history of the 7 killings that gives you the whole history of like the era of Bob Marley in the 70s. And I read Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Mask. I think you can go to the next slide and that should come up. Yep, Black Skin, White Mask. In this, I'm using a layering practice, but there's an image behind the image. Do you see that, Nicole?
I do now, you know, when you kind of like get a larger perspective on it, because I think you spend so much time on the details, because this is such a intricate and detailed work. But yeah, when you kind of zoom out, the perspective is really wonderful.
Yeah, So there's a layering going on with the sub image, the image behind. There's triangles on top of triangles on top of triangles, and then there's this layer on top. And I think as people with complex identities, whether it's sexual identities or gender identities or place identities or racial identities or ethnic identities, all of these layers are kind of hidden, but they still peek through. And that's what I was trying to express with this piece.
I love it.
This one is one of my favorites. My favorite Haitian artist, my favorite Haitian author, I hope Roxanne Gay is not listening, but is Edwidge Danticat. And she wrote this story called Breath, Eyes, Memories. And reading that book just makes you travel, like you feel like you're in Haiti in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. She makes this journey from being born from sexual violence, born out of sexual violence. Her mom leaves her in Haiti with her grandmother. And when she turns 18, she finally, I don't want to give too much of the book, but she moves to Brooklyn and becomes and embraces this Haitian American identity. So all of these books kind of shape the artwork. And what I wanted the artwork to do is just reflect the energy or the moods or the feelings that I got from the books, and then hopefully I would inspire people to take those journeys or make those memories for themselves by accessing the art that I'm creating.
This is one of my favorites also. And now it's really great to know that I have some reading material I can use to relate to it. This one is cool. Yeah, but I mean, seeing your work all together, you know, I've always really loved your work and the aesthetic of your work, but you know, it has so much deeper meaning hearing you talk about it, hearing you relate to history and sociology and literature, and I think that really sort of comes through in how you talk about your work as well. So I'm gonna see, yes, there are other people who very much appreciate your reading lists and learning more about it. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I hope for the audience that helps gives more context to JP's work, even though, you know, I mean, art truly does stand on its own, but it's just that icing on the cake to learn more about the artist and work. So good luck with restoring the mural. What's the temperature in Chicago right now?
It's not too bad. It's probably
Not
like
bad.
86. Well,
Oh.
I'm also in the shade, so it's probably like 89 right here.
Compared to DC, that's positively balmy. Well, I look forward to seeing the restoration happen. You can follow JP. We posted your Instagram handle in the chat, so totally follow along with the process. Check out his work on the By the People site, and we're all coming to Stable once we're all allowed to come back there. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.
Amazing. Bye, JP.
Bye-bye.
Fabulous. All right. So we are going to move right along. And I think, yes, okay, Mariah is up next. So we're going to flip it, come back to DC, and check in with the incredible Mariah Miranda. So a little bit more about Mariah. She is a DC-based documentary style freelance photographer who specializes in portraiture and lifestyle coverage. She's a graduate of the Corcoran College of Art and Design at GW, woo, BFA photojournalism, shout out to NMPJ. During her time at the Corcoran, she also studied at the London College of Communication and the Bezalel Academy of Art in Jerusalem. As a member of the Corcoran's commission-based work for the US Department of State, her portrait was chosen to be part of the National Museum of American Diplomacy's permanent collection, Face of Diplomacy. And last summer, she was the last in-house art resident for A Creative DC, which was located on the Monroe Arts Walk in Brookland here in DC, where she exhibited Reclaimed, which was a portrait series exploring the male gaze within boudoir photography. Mariah's work predominantly focuses on illustrating vulnerability, exploring positives and negatives, and the balancing act that we as humans try to achieve in life. Hey, Mariah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here.
I was going to say, does the audio sound good?
You sound great.
Great. I know the Zoom thing is a little awkward, but I appreciate that we're all just in here to figure out the technical difficulties.
Every day. So tell, I know that you've been doing quite a lot of work. I've seen a lot of your porch series. So how is your studio practice? Where are you working, and what have you been up to during COVID?
It's such a heavy question. I think to give a little background, as a freelancer, I primarily did event coverage work, which kind of encompasses which is how Nicole and I met through By the People, because I photographed the festival last year. So doing a lot of like cultural events, conferences, whatnot, kind of a bread and butter. And so when COVID happened, my entire business was wiped out in 1 week. So it was quite devastating. But as a result, I've been thinking about, okay, what is the next step? What are the goals? Let's go back and remember, why do you do this work, and what do you want to do with your work? So it's been a very powerful time figuring that out, asking big questions, figuring out what's going on with the world at the same time. And so you'll see behind me, I actually have paintings, and I have my, the 5 pieces that I have available on sale. So as a photographer, I don't really have a working studio. It's just more of a separate desk and a separate place to store my things. But I think that's very important when you have a practice, to have a separate space where you can intentionally go to work and create. Because I think as an artist, we always figure out, what is personal and then what is business. And then, the line between those two is always kind of, not there. And so creating a studio for myself at this time has been very impactful for that. And so you referenced my porch portraits, which for anybody who doesn't know, porch portrait is something that photographers across the country, maybe the world, have been doing. It ultimately started as a portrait offering that I was giving for folks who wanted to really capture this time and capture their family, because I think that we all have been trying to find connection and trying to find some sort of rhythm with each other and with our families, and really going through really intense hardships in our relationships. So what started out as a venture to make money during this time was a adventure into people's lives, and people really trusted me with information about their home life, their family life, their relationships. It ended up being kind of like therapy sessions when I would arrive onto these sets, because it's very quick. I show up to somebody's house. They might have a porch, they might not. I might just do some photos outside. I actually am closing up on the porch portrait offer just because I wanted to offer something that was very affordable and economical for people during this time. And now it's not as economical, but I just hit 100 people, or 100 different families. And so, 95% of those people I've never met before. So it's been a very powerful exchange of, me showing up and acknowledging these people where they are in their time. Since so much of photography is kind of fabricated, people are very concerned about how they look, their outfits and the locations. And so kind of presenting an opportunity to just show life as it is has been very powerful. And I think that translates really well into my work in general. I don't like to do the fake stuff.
Well, I'm looking at your portraiture overall, that sense of like having to, like you're talking about it, especially now, like being almost a therapy session, right? Where you have to have this conversation and you have to, like evoke certain authentic emotions from your sitters, from your subjects. And, can you talk a little bit about the work that you have in the show, and kind of where you were in that moment of you creating that, whether that's mindset. Obviously it was a very different time than now. And so how did that kind of environment and that kind of mental space affect like the work that you're showing in By the People?
Well, the work in By the People show is very much kind of, to me, a representation of my fine art work, which is why I was very excited to have this opportunity to show kind of that more softer, very intimate, very, some people are uncomfortable by the work and some people aren't. And so I decided to show 3 of the pieces in the show are from my series Reclaimed, which in my bio was mentioned that I showed last year. Reclaimed was a series that, I guess let me backtrack a little bit. In terms of therapy, that's what I tell a lot of my clients, what I tell a lot of people is that I'm not just taking photos. I'm quite literally convincing people to feel okay with themselves and their existence to be photographed. And so much of what I do is therapy. It's, you know, really working with somebody where they are. And when you interlace the connection or the dynamic of money or needing these photos for a specific reason, it gets even more complicated. So much of what I do is acknowledge people where they are at that time, because, you know, I've dealt with my own timeline of body dysmorphia, especially as like a plus size mixed race woman. I think that I have really struggled since I was a child with trying to compete with whiteness and skinniness, or, you know, these perceived consumptions of how women should exist in society. It's very much something that has weighed on me, and I've carried it through my whole life. And so when I started the Reclaim series, it quite literally was a action from years of just being so frustrated by being compared to, you know, you have to be a size 2, or you have to be white, or you have to have no hips, or all these certain things. And I think even if you are that quota, you struggle to maintain it, or you struggle to exist in it, or you struggle with all the attention that comes from being what America says you should be in order to be consumed, because that's apparently what women are made for in terms of the mainstream media. And so Reclaimed was my exploration of why does boudoir photography monetize on empowering women. I saw it as like another opportunity to make money off of the hardships that women go through based off of their body or their sexuality, or you know, so many other layers to it. And so when I did some research, I realized that reclaiming was like reclaiming the space, reclaiming the body, because the boudoir room originally was a space for women to go to just to be together and to groom each other and to rest. There's also the implication of, you know, only wealthy women were able to have access to those rooms, because this went back as far as the 1700s. So then the 1900s, when we go to the World War, you know, women are supposed to do the pinup dolls, they're supposed to take photos, like scandalous photos for the men in the war because they're missing their women. And so it's interesting how it has like snowballed into this really massive industry with the hair and the makeup and the lingerie and the photos. And, you know, getting a boudoir session can cost anywhere from $600 to $3,000, which is, you know, not available to everybody. And so I went into the project with that mindset, that kind of like frustrated mindset. And then in the process, I realized that I had all this tension towards myself about, you know, I was angry at my body or my existence or how I exist for why I didn't experience love or, you know, sexual interactions. And so by doing that, I was also providing therapy for all my subjects. So I worked with 20 different women, went into their homes, their home spaces. It was interesting how some people were outside of the home because they didn't feel safe in their boudoir room. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and share my screen and show you some of the photos.
Great. Let's see. All right, I think you can go now.
All right. All right. So, and some of these images are in the By the People show. So this is like the full spectrum of all the images. As you can see, I purposely placed these people in a way that wasn't, you know, with their bums in the air or like lingerie or super sexualized. Some people wanted to be more sexual and some people didn't, but I think the importance is that I gave them the autonomy to choose how they wanted to present themselves. And so when I showed all these pieces in the show, what ended up happening was this really powerful experience where all these women came together, all their communities came together to view the work. And I actually had a little bit of, I had like a bowl that said like, write your intentions of the show or write your review or your experience. And so many of the women were like, I feel so empowered by seeing these women relax or seeing them like, I had one image where, I'll scroll back up. You know, she's playing with her armpit hair. I had one woman who was like, I've had so much shame about my armpit hair, and seeing that made me realize that I'm beautiful, or it doesn't matter, or I just had so many people coming up to me and having these responses. And I think it was also powerful to talk to men in my community about this project and create those conversations and dialogue. And because it's something that we don't talk to with each other, let alone like our communities or our partners. And that's across all spectrums of, orientation, racial, and so forth. And this was such a good project to encompass kind of how I feel about the world and how I want to move forward with my work. Because of COVID, I'm now switching over to doing more commercial and editorial work, but I'm figuring out the dynamic of how do I, make money and also represent things that are accurate and true and not this facade that sometimes companies want to present a certain way.
Everyone in these photos like looks so empowered, relaxed, but then also empowered because you don't get the sense of, I know that you're in the room, but I think it speaks volumes about you as a photographer that, your presence in the room is not encumbering any kind of emotion or feelings of joy or comfort. And I love that emotion and that empowerment comes through in the pieces that you're showing here.
Thank you. There, I'm top of the screen now.
I also, I think I so appreciate you talking about, the challenges that you're facing and how you reacted to the challenges of COVID, and where, you as an entrepreneur, basically, you are a business owner, and the way that you're adapting to that. So I really love checking in with you and love seeing your work and by the people. And we are going to post your Instagram handle and your website in the chat here, because, what I would always say is, so are you doing any work in person right now, like socially distanced, like if people need headshots or any kind of other portraiture, are you available?
I sure am. Please hire me to do your photos. No, doing all kinds of portraits and headshots. And so, if you like my work and if I resonate with the kind of work that you would like to see presented for yourself, like definitely reach out. I'm definitely taking projects at this time.
Awesome. Yes. Hire Mariah for all of your portraits and work. So thank you so much, Mariah. We will talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole.
Bye. So Christina had a question about porch portraits overall. So the porch portraits were images that Mariah was working on that were basically families or individuals who would come out on their porches especially during COVID, when couldn't go into a studio or into a home, and they were happening across the country. So there's actually like a big collection of porch portraiture that is truly a snapshot in time of families and home life as we've all been kind of trapped in our homes over the last 3 months. But yeah, it's a really, really cool movement, and I love that Mariah was taking these. All right, let us move right along to, all right, Eamon, you're up next. Let's see if I can find you. Let's unmute you. Eamon, are you there? Hi. Oh my gosh. Okay, I didn't see you. There you are. I think you have your iPad up too. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. And you have a really amazing Thai name that I cannot pronounce. So can you pronounce it for me?
Like lemon with no L. Yeah, and last name is Surakikoson. It's extra long.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Surakikoson. I did not want to butcher it. So you're a Thai for an artist who's living here in DC, and I know a lot of your work deals with ideas of home and displacement, but Eamon is self-taught, and their drawings and paintings explore the themes of minimalism, abstraction, natural beauty. They're in a variety of media, including paint and ink, which create abstract works that reflect natural beauty and forms. So the works are really experimental and really harmonious and minimalistic, and I'm really, really pleased to learn more about them. So welcome. Tell us more about your practice and your studio.
Yeah, so I'm at home right now, so most of the ink work is done at home. I'm trying to, like create art every day. So if I can't get to the studio to do like acrylic work, so most of the ink work is to be done at home. Yeah. And most of the one that's up at the show right now is make alcohol ink. So you see a lot of like flowy and like texture, a little bit of like detail by pen. Yeah, so those kind of work will be at the show. Yeah. And I have like couple sample of like the older work that I do. So here will be, a little bit of sample of the colors. These are like old work when I was like still experiment about the technique. Yeah, and then the current one will be the one that's up for a show. They're a little bit more like technique of like how to blow the ink and really subtle way. Yeah.
So do you always work in this kind of, like, to me, talk a little bit about your process, because to me it seems like very meditative in this kind of like cyclical and circular reflection. But yeah, talk a little bit about how you're making work and conceiving it.
Yeah, so I start with like something which is like pen, and then I saw this like image online that's like kind of like colors that's flowy like water and like silk. So I was like, oh, what is that? Like, let me try that kind of work, and then experiment it. By then I have a lot of thought and have a lot of anxiety, so like I just got into art maybe a little bit over 3 years ago, and it's been like helping a lot, just like meditation, when you lay everything down and then you in the moment and create something that's you think that will look good, like a create product kind of, and then I really like enjoy the process of making them. Yeah.
And do you always work at this scale? Do you work larger?
So all the ink work, like how to make it flowy, you have to be able to hold like the dish or the paper with hands. So those work it's really depend on the style. So like the one that's up on the show, it's really hard to make it like flat and moving. So those will be maximum of 24 inches by 24 that I can do. But if it's different style, I can go up, to like 3, 5 and all the feet, all the stuff. Yeah.
Do you have some of your, can you like do a little like pano of your studio space? Is that?
At home. So
At home.
like, behind those are like all the new work, and this is the current one that I have that I might put up on the show that's coming up in next couple months. So you can see, the flow of the ink, and then I go do the detail after. So those two I just finished. And for something like this one I just got back from Hyatt. This one is going up at Hyatt Regency in Chicago, no, California. But this is 2019 kind of work. Yeah. So those will be a size or something that I'm comfortable of doing with. Something a little bit bigger is stress me out, and sometimes I not to do so. Yeah, but like another work as like acrylic work, then I can go, as big as the canvas can get. Yeah.
And so your larger work is then in your studio, right? Not at your home.
Oh, street also. Yeah.
Oh, yay. We should, at the end of this, we all have to do a field trip to 520 and like see all of you guys there. And your show that's coming up, that is this fall, right? It's at Strathmore.
Yeah, there's a stretch more. We're not sure if we have a reception, but it's really limited, so I haven't go over the detail with them. But that's happening on September 10. Yeah, so those will be all brushwork and acrylic. You know, like mixed media. Maybe it's hard to do the ink work right now because alcohol so out due to COVID-19. But you know, like if I can get them back in stock and then can like whip it out in a month or two, then that might be there too. Yeah, we'll see.
Oh
Yeah.
wow, so that's so interesting. So okay, so you're having trouble getting materials because they're being you need alcohol to. Wow. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah, it's a bit like crazy, and like all the canvas, you know, they usually like come in a week or two in a week, and then now it's like 2 weeks, so it's a little bit struggle of getting the supply in. On top of that, just feel a little bit isolated, right? Because nothing is normal yet. So yeah, hope, but everybody going through it too. So like hopefully they will be in and everything will be back to normal soon. Yeah.
No, I think that's very true. You know, it's we're all kind of feeling this together, and but there's such strange things that you kind of find that you wouldn't expect to like have trouble with, you know, getting alcohol or like finding
Yeah.
materials or, you know, it's really crazy. So how long have you been here in DC?
I moved here when I was 19, and I'm 35 now, so it's been a little bit too long. But this is my home, you know. Like I really like it here. I like that. Past couple years, a lot of people seem to like support local business and local artists. So like I'm super grateful for that. Yeah.
What has been, you know, the biggest, I guess, change that you've seen over the last, you know, couple of decades?
Again, I didn't like, I'm self-taught, so I didn't really like go to, you know, didn't like have opportunity to go to like art school or anything like that. So I won't really know much of the background. Mostly just that, you know, like just to see people, a lot of commercial work that they're really like supportive of DC local artists, and you know, that's just that. Yeah, for me. Yeah, but just like during COVID, it's just really affecting a lot of me personally for the show, because we're supposed to have a couple shows coming up, you know, and that's got canceled, and not be able to have people like doing the studio visits. So that's kind of, you know, bummer, and like feel a little bit like isolated. And then when you get into that mode, you have all this time to creating art, but you're not feeling creative. So that's my struggle a little bit. Yeah.
So how are you kind of dealing with that? Like, do you find that you're taking time to really reflect on work? I mean, obviously you have a show coming up, so you are making work, but you know, where are you kind of finding inspiration these days?
A lot of my work, I tend to do like you know, like it's blank canvas, so everything white. I would do something that's like main attraction, and then I work through the detail. And I kind of like working through the detail, do a lot of light to make it like really like precise. Yeah, so that's like, and then, you know, like you kind of like step backward and then like look it from far away. If it's look right, then it's ready. Yeah, but that's just me. Mostly I just do a lot of art for a meditation purpose, and you know, a lot of it have to do with like all the stuff that's going on with like, you know, my surrounding DC, like COVID, and you know, like Black Lives Matter kind of events. So like I would name the piece or dedicate that piece or the mood that I'm in to that situation that I'm in, kind of. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think like we're internalizing so many things, but there's so many external factors that are happening in the world, and you know, we're dealing with isolation, but then also global movements, which I think that CJ and JP kind of talked about, and how our work. I'm so interested to kind of look back on this time and see, you know, the things that people have been creating, or the collective energy and work that has come out of this time period, because, you know, there is a lot of inspiration out there in terms of content, but yet the community is really isolated from one another, you know. Like for
Yeah.
you, I'm guessing like being at 52O, you're used to like being surrounded by a lot of artists and people, and then transitioning to home. I mean, do you think that after COVID, whatever the after COVID world looks like, you
Yeah.
know, are there things that you're going to change about your practice? You know, are you going to, are you, do you like working out of your home? Do you miss the studio? Do you think that there's like space for like both in your practice going forward?
Yeah, well, I have to. I'm trying to like create something every day. So, you know, like home, we have a little, you know, we don't have dining room area. We have a studio instead because my roommate also is an artist, so we use the space for that. Being at 52O, it's really, I feel like connect with the different artists, and then, you know, time to time we chat about what we want to do, what's the project. Is kind of like the movement that people do of like Black Lives Matter, like, which is showing their art, selling their art, and, you know, donates like portion of their profits to the community. So I'm like into that, and without having that connection through 52O or another artist, then I won't be able to know like what I can do for the community, you know. So like I'm grateful for my studio also. Yeah, and everybody that's like really nice, and it's such an old school building to be. Yeah, so like
It's
yeah,
amazing. I miss going there.
I hope open studio, you know, soon work
Yeah.
together. Yeah, we're just not there.
Well, I mean, so you sold 2 pieces in the show so far. So there are still more of your alcohol, ink, and pen works that are in the By the People monochrome show. So for anyone who wants to see those in closer detail, please go to Emin's page on the By the People Squarespace website. We also posted your Instagram handle in the chat so we can follow some of your process, because I think your Instagram is really, really lovely, and I love seeing the work that you have in there. So but thank you so much for coming online and joining us today and telling us more about what you've been working on.
Yeah, thank you so much. Nice to meet you. Yeah,
Nice
hopefully.
to meet you. We see you in person at some point
Yeah,
in the
I
future,
know.
right? All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Amazing. Awesome. I love when I get to go to an artist page and I see a couple of red dots. It's always such a great feeling. So awesome. We are going to head over. We'll stay here in DC and we will move over to Chris Combs, who is an artist and technologist based here in DC, creates really provocative technology artworks. His first solo exhibition, which was entitled Judging Me, Judging You, was at the DC Art Center's Nano Gallery and explored themes of surveillance and control. And his work, Markov Radio, was included in a one-day sound scene event at the Hirshhorn Museum, which is a really exciting festival. He was a photo editor for National Geographic for 5 years and has photographed autism, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and traffic cones as Nat Geo projects. He is also an alumni of the Corcoran College of Art and Design, so we're representing Corcoran here today. But Chris, over to you. What have you been working on?
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's really a pleasure. Thank you to Monochrome Collective and Halcyon for having me. Such amazing work so far today. Those are tough acts to follow. I'm going to do my best. But let me just start off by saying that the works I make are sort of interactive sculptures or time-based sculptures that involve electronics in them. And I'm going to show you really quickly the pieces in the art fair. So one of them kind of behind me here is a little bit hard to see at scale, but we'll bring it closer. These are hand washing timers. So these are just timers that show you 20 seconds. The screen is bright red, but it's so bright that it's sort of washing out on my webcam here. So pretend that's red. But this is a timer. It's a very functional device that when you wave your hand in front of it, it sets it to 20 seconds and counts down for you. So we're doing 10 of those. This is an exclusive color. I've been selling them in white for a while, but this yellow color is exclusive to this art fair. So there are going to be 10 of those sold ever. If you want one, grab them now. And on the wall behind me here, these 2 pieces here are 2 of the 4 in a series of 4, I should say, an addition of 4, of a piece called Impressions, which, let me just get off camera here for a second so you can see what it does. But these 2 here, they react to movement as there's a camera in the device that senses movement in front of them and displays movement on this custom circuit board with 192 LEDs it shows the movement that detects in front of it in this sort of sparkling, shimmering way. So that's two different pieces. They are separate. So it's each of them is one of the addition of 4. And then right behind me, over my left shoulder here, is a piece called Point of Sale, which uses a cash register display to show evocative messages about pandemic, hoarding, consumerism, environmental themes, all that good stuff. So that is right over on my shoulder there. So a lot of the pieces that I make do involve electronics, like I said, and just a tiny bit about my background. I'm not like an electrical engineer. I didn't go to engineering school. I went to the Corcoran for photo. So this is all stuff that I have learned since 2013 after picking up a New Year's resolution. I was like, when I was a kid, I wanted to learn robots, and my dad got me this book, and I bounced right the hell off of this book. It is like, it goes right into like atom theory and, electrons, and like, ugh, I didn't learn. But nowadays we have the internet, and I would really encourage anyone, especially someone who is not a like straight, white, cisgendered male like me, let me just tell you, it is totally possible to learn this stuff. We're always told like art people and engineering people are very different. No, I don't think that's true at all. I think art people have great attention to detail, and if you're interested in learning this stuff, you totally can. Just go get a kit from Adafruit or SparkFun, one of which, by the way, is run by a female CEO. There's a lot of opportunities out there for learning this stuff, and you can just mess with it and have fun. You might blow up an LED or two, but go for it. So that was a little bit about kind of process, like hinting at it there. Let me just actually, if you don't mind, if you see this white thing here, this is a camera on my desk pointed downwards at my work surface. So I'm just going to switch you over to that camera. So just give me one tiny second here, and I can talk a little bit more about how this stuff actually plays out. Okay, so this is one of those hand washing timers here. You can see the red a little bit better there. But this is what the timer looks like when it's completed. It's this box, has a nice label on the back, wall mounting, all that good stuff. And these are the parts that make it possible. These are circuit boards. I design circuit boards. It's kind of like Nerd Illustrator. Like I have this software that lets me lay out all the functions that I wanted to do. I wire everything up in software, and then it lets me drag things around and put them on an actual circuit board. So I like move this thing up here. This is the actual screen. So I just drag all these places. I set the size of the board. I like do all that stuff. It gives me a big fat file, which I then send off to a factory to have it manufactured, because there's noxious chemistry involved. Some people do that stuff at home, but I'm working out of a 1-bedroom condo. The studio that you're seeing here, this is a corner of the bedroom that I share with my spouse. So, so I try not to do the really nasty stuff at home. So I get these circuit boards back from the factory. It's manufactured to my specifications. You can see my URL on there. Here, let me just bring it up a little bit so you can see better. But these circuit boards come back to me without anything on them. And the things on them are the important bits. So next up, I get to add all the important bits. And the way that that works is I have this gray goo, which is kind of appropriate if you've read much about nanomachines. But this gray goo is actually, it looks gray if you look at it closely, but it's silver. And the reason it's silver is because it is a suspension of tiny, tiny silver balls of solder. I use lead-free solder for those who are curious. This solder will melt from the goo into like actual connections if I get it really hot. And so I have this special like heat gun kind of thing that is used to melt things. It's used to melt this paste and attach the components to the board. So all this stuff up here, these are the tiny components that I use to make it happen. So like, for example, this right here is sort of the main brains of the operation. This is a chip, microcontroller. So that there, I place it on the board, I put some goo under it, and then when I heat it up, the whole thing melts on and becomes permanent. But they get a lot smaller than that. So like this right here is a tiny, I can barely pick it up. You can see I've had a lot of coffee today. But this little guy right here, I don't think my camera will even focus on it. It's too small. But that is a resistor. It looks like a little blob of dust. But I need a lot of those little blobs of dust on each of these circuit boards to make them do anything. So a lot of what I end up doing just sort of methodically, as again, like I heard catharsis came up earlier as a topic, but like as a sort of means of relaxing and getting anxiety out of my system, just tweezing one of these little things at a time onto a board and then getting it all really hot and melting them on there. Let me show you a closer view of the pieces I showed you on the wall a second ago. This is impressions assembled. This is one of the other 4 in the edition. But you can see here, those are the same sort of size of things. These are individual LEDs. It's a little hard to get my camera to focus on this too, but I'll fuss with it. But these individual LEDs here, there's 192 of them, as I mentioned, and they each just go on by hand. So I tweeze them all on with a little bit of paste under each one and heat the whole thing up, and they melt together. So it's a very like sort of slow and fun and thoughtful process, and I enjoy that about it. What I enjoy less is the times when I get all the way through it and realize I made some mistake in the wiring. But you know, it's stuff you can work through. So this, again, these are more of the LEDs. This is a little vial containing about 20 of the LEDs, in, you know, like the ones in impressions that I was showing you a second ago. So these individual LEDs, just tiny, tiny, tiny. But you have to get them around the right way too. It turns out there's these little tiny green markings on them, and if you get it backwards, they don't do anything. So it takes some patience to do like this kind of electronics, but it's also possible to get started with things that are much larger and easier to connect together. And what I like doing with all of these things, I have some people ask me, like, why do you make art with these machines? What makes them art? And to me, I think the interesting thing about art machines versus like a real proper machine that does something functional, like the hand washing timers actually, but what I think is interesting about technology for art is that instead of using technology to answer questions or solve questions, I can use them to bring up questions or stir up trouble. And there are so many interesting things to chew on these days. I really am interested in themes of algorithmic failure or algorithmic bias. Like when you teach a computer or neural network, when you teach it to identify things, you teach it by showing it examples. Those examples come from human beings. If those examples are poorly chosen, they will reflect the biases of the people creating the data set, such as when an early version of Google Photos identified people with dark skin tone as gorillas. That is an actual thing that happened. Google responded by actually just preventing their software from identifying primates. So there are a lot of really interesting, troubling applications of learning technology like that, artificial intelligence, neural networks. I think that's an interesting area to look at. I'm interested too in just sort of image recognition and how it works and how it works for us as humans. These grids on impressions, they're not actually like structured like rows and columns of pixels like you see on a usual computer screen. I took those grids and scrambled it using an algorithm in my design. And I'm interested in seeing how far you can go and make something that is still recognizable. Like, what are the edges of our recognition limit? How does our image recognition work? I find that very interesting as a subject area. I'm also interested in themes of surveillance and control, because there's plenty of that going on. I'm interested in the way that habit-forming technologies like social media are conditioning us to treat interruptions as validation. Those are interesting themes to me. But yeah, there's a lot of material, and I think that using the tools of technology as a way of questioning technology, to me, that's kind of what it's all about. That's the fun part. So these are some of the processes that I use to do it. I have a couple other pieces here that are not included in the art fair, but snap that stuff up, guys. This is a great opportunity, and I'm only going to make 10 of these little yellow ones, so if you want one.
Those hand washing timers are so fabulous. And I think, you know, what I love about the hand washing timer and the register are, like, yes, they're talking about something that is a little bit dark and sinister, but there's this level of humor in it. You know, is that for you in your practice overall, is that something that you're sort of striving for, is tempering like this sort of like darkness of like where technology could take us with like inserting a little bit of humor to make us think on a different level?
I think that helps. It certainly makes it a less bitter pill. If you bring people in with something that's sort of fun and interactable, and you feel like you can just do something sort of wondrous, I think that opens the door for people to hear a little bit more, to eat a little more of the vegetables. So I think that's definitely key. I'm interested in delving a little more into the sort of dark side of it too. I'm working on an environmental installation that will be called Maelstrom. And it was supposed to be at Rhizome this fall. It's totally up in the air right now. There might be a version of it at the Arlington Arts Center sometime soon. But the idea of Maelstrom would be that you would enter an environment that uses little bits of your information, and not against you exactly, but it would make you feel like you're at the center of a conspiracy theory if I do it right. So like for example, you'll be incentivized, it'll say, hey, wouldn't you like to scan, you know, your driver's license for a second? And you scan your driver's license, and then you see it propagating among 40 or 50 small machines all around you, sort of mounted on the walls. You'll see each of them spreading rumors to each other about you. So that might be a little on the heavier side, but hopefully it'll still be fun. I'm not actually going to use anyone's information against them. That's for, you know, larger companies to do. But I think that bringing people in with a little bit of a lighter touch certainly helps. I do like that sense of wonder, and I want to find some of it.
I get that a lot from your work. Now, so like when you were zooming in before, it seems like as you were learning some of these processes, there's certainly a lot of trial and error, and teaching yourself like the electrical engineering and Raspberry Pi and then programming. Do you find that there are spaces where, as an artist, you can go for support, like a community, a fab lab, a network of people who are like, okay, it's really awesome that this project is for art. Like, let's have a conversation about like art and tech and like where those intersections lie.
Yeah, I mean, I've had such a good reception at so many places, honestly. There are certainly some communities that are more like engineering focused and are a little less receptive to random, type B artists. But I have certainly had a great time at the Fab Lab at MLK, which I think is theoretically reopening sometime amid all this COVIDness. I don't know how that's going to play out, but the Fab Lab at the MLK library has 2 laser cutters, which are 15 grand a pop, but they let you use them for free. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in kind of learning these things. They have classes. You have to take a class before you can use something that can cut through wood. But they have classes that are very like open and supportive, and they have everything you need to get started, computers, software, all that stuff. So that's been one great community. Another great community online has been a company called Ada Fruit. And that is Ada, like ADA, and then Fruit. It's named after its CEO, who goes by the handle online Lady Ada, and that name in turn is named after Ada Lovelace, who in the mid-late 1800s invented the first programming language for computers that did not yet exist. So the first programmer was Ada Lovelace, and that sort of history is being shared forward with Ada Fruit, which is a company based out of Brooklyn that has the most fabulous tutorials for making glowing things and just fun stuff, and like toys and interactive games and whatever else you can think of that you would want to make. They probably got a tutorial for it. They sell a lot of products, and it's very clear and open, like that's how they make their money, but they give you these learning materials for free, and they have a great supportive community too, so I'd highly recommend that.
Awesome. So this is not scary. It's not inaccessible. Anyone can learn. And while I feel like while we're still stuck indoors for the most part, what better way to maybe grab onto some new technology.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. And we will definitely look out for future installations, hopefully happening in the near future. I'd love to experience some of this immersive technology that you have going on. But yes, hand washing timers, do not sleep on those. They're very, very awesome and practical. And you can have this artwork in one. Well, no, there's actually only 9 left now. So one of 9. But
thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. We put your website on By the People and your Instagram handle in the chat. So check Chris out, and we will see you soon. Thanks so much. Awesome. I might have to scoop up the hand washing timer for myself, because what better way to mark this crazy time we're in than a little piece of artwork next to your sink. All right, well, we are going to keep going, and I am really, really excited to welcome Lynn Hansen here on the Zoom platform for By the People Monochrome Artist Talks. Thank you so much, Lynn, for joining us. I know it was really late notice, but I really wanted to talk about your work, and I know you're traveling. But yeah, so a little bit about Lynn. Lynn actually has a background as a clothing designer with major companies like Pendleton, Wool & Mills, as well as her own independent clothing line. So originally coming from design and fashion, but her artwork has been shown throughout the US and internationally. She holds a post-grad degree from the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising with studies at Parsons School of Design. And she now divides her time between Washington, D.C. and Sun Valley, Idaho, which I believe is where you're joining us from. But welcome, Lynn. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. I escaped in time to Idaho.
That sounds lovely.
It is.
Well, we have a slideshow, so let me know if you want me to play that now. Do you want to talk a little bit about the work, or should we just dive right in?
Let's dive right in.
All right, perfect. Let me share my screen. All right. Fabulous. Can everybody see that? Great. Lynn, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. This is a painting that I have combined. It kind of wraps up what I'm trying to do with my art. It combines the duality of seed beads, which the intricacy of the seed beads, I think I have a close-up next of this painting, and the relief of plaster and the smoothness and layers of encaustic painting. And I'm trying to combine textures and juxtapositions. Can keep going. Then I combine preserved cottonwood that I find on a ranch in Colorado on a riverbed that's been weathered just incredibly. And it has knots and swirls and the roughness, and combining the different textures. Again, with beading and the relief. And I actually beaded inside of the eye there. You can see a little glimmer of the beads and the duality of all the textures that are going on.
These are just incredible, incredible.
Thank you. This is another painting. And I like to use different size beads and different matte versus shiny. And I deal with gesture drawings, which is use of trying to find the most minimal use of line and form to get the feeling. And so you get a feeling rather than a shape. This is a sculpture, a wall hanging of a horse head, and the wood has a big giant hole in it. And then I create a sculpture around the wood, and parts are beaded, parts are not. So you get a lot of different textures going on.
What comes first, the sort of found object, or do you sort of have an idea and are looking for objects that then represent that idea?
No, it's usually the found object first. Later you'll see more of my torso sculptures. I am a breast cancer survivor, and so I want to make a statement that breast cancer survivors dealing with body image, it's an ugly, beautiful situation. And so in that particular item, I would go out on the riverbed and look for breasts.
Mm. I love these details.
I also, from my clothing design background, I like to do fashion illustration. And so this is one interpretation using the beads and encaustic and pen and ink. Lots and lots of layers.
Yeah, I think I had seen this one in 2D at some point in the last year or so, and
this one was actually in the show last year without the beading.
Okay, makes sense. I was like, this looks very familiar, but I don't remember it being so detailed.
Right. I took it a little further.
So when did you start getting into this beading technique? Is that another, does it come from your background in fashion? Is it something that is more related to your art practice?
No, it comes from fashion. My daughter was a competitive ice skater, and I designed and beaded her costumes and couldn't stop doing it. And so I just had to find an outlet for it other than skating costumes. And so I started beading wooden birdhouses and then took it further and further. And this represents what I'm trying to portray with the ugly, beautiful concept of breast cancer survivors. This is a torso, and also where the negative space, I do a lot of negative space exploration and trying to leave things unfinished and emphasize the negative space.
Was this definitely one where we were out looking for a form that might
Yeah.
represent some breasts?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you can see the worm hole tunnels. It's just fascinating, the wood.
And you're finding these out west, right? Where you're
In the ranch in Colorado, there's a riverbed
Wow.
that just weathers the wood in such a unique way. And then I preserve the wood and then build a sculpture around it.
It's definitely, you know, this kind of collision of the elements, right? This wood
Exactly.
and water, and then the sort of human hand element. Yeah, I remember this was one of the pieces last year that sold very, very quickly, was one of these beaded sculptures.
Yes.
They're so beautiful. And tell us more about this piece, because it's so intriguing.
This is a ballerina bustier and tulle skirt. Again, I wanted to emphasize the ugly beautiful. The name of this piece is Cancer, My Body is Not That of a Ballerina. And ballerinas and women in general put so much pressure on themselves to have the perfect body. And this is my statement of, well, you can be beautiful, you can be ugly. There's and then the tulle overlaps on the beading of the skirt below the tulle.
Mm.
You can see the detail there, and it's a wall hanging.
The tool definitely, it creates this mysterious kind of haze over the piece. That, yes, absolutely references dance and ballet, but then it also has that sort of mental and societal implication to it as well. I love it.
There's distortion in everything that I do. I love distortion.
It's super complex, as objects. They're beautiful and tortured, and all of the kinds of complex things that we're talking about,
which is what cancer survivors go through.
And this was the piece from last year, right?
No,
or this is currently in the show. New piece.
Similar
Okay.
to last year, yes. This one has more movement than the one last year.
And I love how the gesture of the figure does create that movement, but then also this incredible beading in the back, the rippling effect, and the way that the beads are placed. It adds a whole other level, a whole other dimension of movement to it. So wonderful. I wish that we could see them in person, but this is your detail shots are incredible. So thank you so much for sending really, really great details.
They're very tactile, and I've always encouraged people to touch them because there's a sense of gentleness, and it's like petting a dog. It soothes you. I used to send my children, I would bead balls for them and send them to school with balls when they took their test. This is one that's not in the show. This is a very contorted piece of wood that I found and had a really good time.
Wow. It's kind of amazing, very early, our first artist today, CJ, was talking about the kind of Rorschach nature of ink blots and what he was doing. But there is a certain Rorschach type nature of things you find in nature, you know,
Very
you know,
much so.
you as the artist have to see this and envision something, and then, you know, we as the audience are envisioning so many different things. It's so wonderful. So do you normally do most of your work in DC or in Sun Valley?
Both. When I'm in Sun Valley, I work in Sun Valley. There's a piece behind me that I did while I was here. And when I'm in DC, I work in DC. I have my home is my studio, and I just work in my living room and go crazy wherever I am.
Do you think that your environment, you know, being out west or being in DC affects the type of work you're creating? Or are you, you know, are you very kind of like, do you work on one piece at once and kind of take it between both studios? Or, you know, how does your flow work depending on where you are?
I don't think it matters where I am. I do take pieces back and forth. The last sculpture was back and forth and back and forth. It makes life complex. And I find out what's shippable and what's not. But I find that both environments are so stimulating in such different ways. And so it just helps me create the total piece.
I have a question from Steven, who's wondering how you attach the beads to your work.
I string them and then I glue them.
Wow.
And at the moment, my 7-year-old granddaughter is helping me to string them because it's a very tedious process.
I was going to say that must take an incredible amount of time. And I guess that I'm now wondering, you know, how much do you work intuitively, or is there a lot of kind of planning that has to go in? Because if you're stringing, you know, different sections and patterning, you know, how prepared do you have to be?
Not very. I come up with the products that I'm going to use, and then I just let them tell me what to do.
It's really interesting. But yeah, thanks for your question, Stephen. So Lynn, we're going to post the link to the works that you have in the show in the chat, as well as your Instagram. I love seeing your work and seeing where in the world you're at, because it must be so incredibly inspiring and beautiful to be out in Idaho
It is.
right now.
It is. Thank you.
But thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being in the exhibition. It's been so wonderful to get to connect and learn more about your work.
Thank you, and thank you for including me.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye. Stay cool in DC.
Thank you.
Bye.
Awesome. So great. I love just having those pieces in last year's exhibition. I wanted to touch it and I didn't, even though they're, I guess we could, very tactile. So
yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to move on. We only have 2 more artists left in today's artist talks, and we're going to come back to DC and switch things over to chatting with Arian Wakisa. Arian became really fascinated at a very young age with his father's Nikon, and developed a love for photography and art. He began self-learning, dedicated himself to the art of creating captivating imagery. Later on, he studied art and design at AIU in Atlanta, where he established a reputation for having an enthusiastic eye for fashion, beauty, and lifestyle photography, which definitely plays into this work. But Arian, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell us more about, are you here in DC currently?
Yeah, I'm currently in DC right now. So I've been just working out of my apartment and venturing out when I can.
Yeah, it's been super, I think, challenging heat wise. But you're from DC. You went to school in Atlanta and you came back, and tell us more about, you know, your photography practice, the works that are in the show, and just where you find inspiration in your imagery.
Well, because I studied a lot of fashion, a lot of my work is kind of reflected off of that. I was really drawn to a lot of the imagery that I would find in like magazines at a young age and stuff like that. And I always was wondering like how are these images created? So it kind of drew me to switching from studying fashion design to photography. So a lot of my work is inspired by everyday people, you know, what they're wearing, how we connect to situations going on in our daily lives, you know, how we've changed with the weather. So, you know, a lot of those things kind of inspire my moods for my shooting and stuff like that. But as well as kind of approaching it from somewhat of a photojournalist type of perspective, you know, wanting to tell a story in a sense. So yeah, but yeah, I've been born and raised in DC, lived here all my life for the most part. And then came back and now I'm here doing some more work and trying to embrace the city again.
How long have you been back in DC from Atlanta?
I came back in 2011.
Okay.
Yeah. So quite a bit, yeah.
So you've been here for a lot of the kinds of changes and the art in the arts in DC and in the overall community. Some of the work that you have in the show, I think is from DC, right? Is a lot of the kind of actions and protests that have been happening.
Yeah. A lot of the work that I featured in this show has been in DC. Different things in different areas. Some of the cultural events that I've participated in, and as well as some of the rallies as well. So yeah.
And is that, I mean, are you, well, I want to talk about some of the rodeo pieces in a second,
okay.
But, you know, you talk about finding, you know, this kind of photojournalistic approach to some of your work. You know, do you find yourself like just out and about always with a camera, or are you planning kind of what you're going to, you know, thinking that you want to make a body of work around a certain event or a protest or a rally? You know, how do you start to approach your practice?
So it's two things. Well, one, if I have a project in my mind, then I'll just, you know, formulate something around that. But if I'm out and about, I'm usually just looking for something interesting, and just something that can tell a story, whether it's visually or emotionally. Like so much of a plan, just kind of see what inspires me. But a lot of the stage work that I do, there's usually a plan or format that I usually approach, and it that inspiration, like, that can stem from various things. A lot of the stuff that's been going on now, a lot of my older work kind of reflects some of the things that's been going on now. So I've been using a lot of that, kind of re-editing those and putting those in different formats just to evoke some of those same emotions.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like a lot of parallels between some of the imagery. And again, like another, you know, I think talking to Mariah, having this moment in time, right, that feels like a snapshot, but then it's also incredibly universal and relevant, you know, as we move into the future, is, I think, represents the importance and kind of power of photography during this time of where we need to really document what has been happening to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been incredible seeing other artists to capture certain moments and kind of just reflecting on my own work in the past and stuff like that. So yeah.
So I want to talk about the rodeo series. Where was this, and you know, talk a little bit about that environment and what it was like to photograph these moments.
So this was a series of photos that I did. This was actually my first introduction into the Black Rodeo. It's the Wilson Pickett Rodeo that takes place in PG County, Maryland. My uncle is one of the participants in the show, and this was kind of like my first time hearing about it. It was just so amazing to kind of see, so many Black people and just engage into this culture. So it was just a really awe-inspiring moment. And then to have a family member in it, it was just a beautiful moment for me. So a lot of the photos in there just kind of were just my fascination with this new thing that that's been around for decades, but for me it was just a new experience, and I just wanted to capture that.
I think certainly for like a lot of people who see this imagery, when we think about like rodeo and popular culture, it is something that is very kind of Texas, Midwestern, very
Yeah.
white.
Yeah.
And so, I especially like love this image of this girl at the rodeo, kind of in with the hats and, everything that we associate with the kind of imagery and symbolism of rodeo, but in a completely different context. And I think it's really powerful. And also, like in its own way, when I see these images, like I want to know more about Black rodeo, where it came from, how it ended up in PG County,
Yeah.
and where all of those kinds of like cross-cultural things have started to happen, because like I truly think that it starts to talk about ownership of different imagery and ownership of different elements of what we consider American culture, right? Like that people's conceptions of who owns this kind of event or who owns this image, isn't what we originally think it is. So
yeah. And the surprise to me was that Black culture is heavily steeped into the rodeo culture. Wilson Pickett, who was a Black cowboy, he was a not only a cowboy, but he was a showman. And so there were rodeo competitions, during his time, and it just became more of a traveling kind of event. So today, they keep up that same tradition, and so it travels from different states. The competition, one of the competitions starts here, and then they move on to they do move on to Texas and Missouri and so forth and so on, and even Florida. But it's really amazing to witness, and just to really see this how broad this culture is for us.
Have you had the chance to have conversations with your uncle about how he got into rodeo and where his inspiration comes from?
Yeah, we talked briefly about it. I mean, in a sense, an urban cowboy. He owns he farms, So, but it was really no surprise for him to be in the show, but it was just. It was just really amazing to know that something like this was, here in our area. Again, like you said, I mean, this was something you might expect for, in Texas or Oklahoma or something like that. So, but like I said, there's a rich urban, if I like to say, urban cowboy history here in our area as well too. So he actually is a part of one of the membering groups that does parades and stuff in the city and stuff like that during certain events. So yeah, that's one of the things that drew him, to this event.
Got it. Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Like I love like learning more about the region and all of the intricacies and awesome things that happen. I guess what have you been working on during COVID, and how are you sustaining yourself? Are you still working and photographing? Have you been, what have you been working on?
So right now I am putting together a few projects, more of a portrait series, a lot, because I've been really inspired by a lot what's going on. So a lot of the photos that I have or the projects that I'm working on are just kind of reflected on that. So it is a bit of a challenge now because I do a lot of my work in studio with other people. So, working with schedules a lot and then still dealing with the pandemic and stuff like that. So those are some of the challenges that I'm working with. But you know, as an artist, you know, we always try to find things to work around things and to get the job done and do what inspires us. So, but yeah, I have a few portrait projects I'm working on that focus on have a focus in fashion, but it's more so of, you know, how it represents us during these times and stuff like that. You know, more about the language that we put out through our exterior persona, I guess. You know.
Yeah. Where are you in a studio building with people? Where you work at it normally?
So usually I will do some of the local studios in the area. I don't have a studio of my own, but you know, there are quite a few here that are, you know, really open to you know, that you can work with and stuff like that. There's also a new studio that just opened up in PG County. It's called the Dojo. So I will be probably doing some work out of there as well, with working with a few photographers.
That's awesome. Well, we would love, I'm gonna post your Instagram in the chat, and your website. Bridget was asking, where can we see more rodeo photos? Are they on your personal website to check out?
Yeah, we're putting some things together now, so we're gonna put more of a full line of it on my website. So that should be out in a couple of days or so. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we will definitely make sure to follow up with everybody here with some updates on that and any, you know, opportunities and shows that you have coming up. I think it's a really awesome series and something super, super important to the region.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Arian, for joining us, and thank you for being part of this exhibition. It's been a really wonderful to get to know your work and a little bit more about you. Thank you so much. It's been an extremely great pleasure. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. All right. So for Christina and Bridget, if you want to see some of the work, if you go to Arian's page that Arian posted in the chat, which is on the By the People Squarespace, or the art fair site, you can see 2 examples of the rodeo series that are currently available as part of the exhibition. And then, like you said, you can check out Arian's website in the coming days for more of this series. That's really incredible. All right, well, we are coming up to the last talk that we have today, and I am so excited because Cheryl Edwards is just a force here in DC, and I'm so honored that she's part of this exhibition and that we'll get a chance to chat with her today. She's been living here in DC for a couple of decades, for the past 25 years at least, and has exhibited in so many shows in DC and in New York and Virginia, Maryland, Miami, Texas, Pennsylvania, Germany, Monaco, Hong Kong, all over the world. Such a superstar. And she's also senior advisor at the David Driscoll Center at the University of Maryland, a board member of the Studio Visit program, a member of Kunst International, a member of the Education Committee of the McLean Project for the Arts, and advisor to Washington Sculptures Group here in Washington, DC. So thank you, Cheryl, so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well. I just want to tell you, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be part of this. And I have been working at home. COVID has brought about a lot of things and some major decisions that I've made. But I will first talk about, you know, my practice. My practice has been about people, but in the idea of identity and memory. And I have been using the element of water as a metaphor to express that visually. I've been going down this particular road for about 5 years, and it continues to morph into something else. And so the works that are in the By the People Festival are works that I actually made that were supposed to be exhibited in Germany in Zindenfeiger and Arte 2020. So I was so pleased that I had an opportunity to show them somewhere. And these particular works are a continuing evolution of that idea of identity and memory, in the sense that we all have the element of water within ourselves and within all living things. Without water, what would exist? Plants, life form, humans. It would be very difficult. So with that similar and same identity, then how are we so different? And I think it's so apropos to what's going on now. That my work has been about, you know, cultures, politics, race, and in the sense that I have been using this metaphor to encourage the discussion for people to elevate themselves to another level, to realize the sameness and the oneness. So the work that's in the show is a part of that series. And that started germinating in December because I had thoughts of my mother. And that I was thinking about what is oneness and how are we the same? And I came to the concept of unconditional love. And so that was very interesting because I said, well, you know, who expresses that in reality, you know, and what's the closest that I can imagine that I've been exposed to that? And I thought about my mother. So the organic forms that I'm working with now are Egyptian paddle dolls, and I call them water angels. And the Egyptian paddle doll is the oldest and first doll of the world, created in around 1040 to 2060 BC in Egypt. And these dolls were made out of the oars that the Egyptians used to row, and they were placed into the tombstones of the dead. So during this time in COVID, I had an opportunity to go deeper into the research. And what I found out was that these women, they would make these dolls, and these women would dance in the nude, and they had a papyrus, which contained a ritual. And then they would place these paddles within the tombs. And the rituals were generated for the main purpose of soul retrieval. So that was good to spend this time to find this out. Currently, I'm not in my studio. My studio is at Brookland, and it was there. I've been there for 7 years, but I made a huge decision during COVID that I'm shutting down my studio, and I'm going to build a studio behind my home. I think it's time to do that. And so I'm actually packing up this month, and I've converted my living room. I've been working the whole time during COVID because if I couldn't, I would be crazy. As I think all artists are so lucky that we have art and blessed, you know, to keep our sound mind during this time. We could pretend like we're on an infinite residency and get some work done. I've been telling my friends we need to create like our hair is on fire because these are important times. And so with that, I'll go and start showing you some of the work that is in the show. That is, you can see, because when I submitted it, I didn't have an opportunity to get these professionally photographed because we got shut down. So the first one that I made is this one. I think you can see it. And so these are ink stained on canvas. Let me turn off the voice on the other one. I got too many things going on. Ink stain on canvas. And I don't use a brush. It is several layers of ink that I apply on raw canvas. And my work is mixed media. So you can see that I use stitching. And I've done photo transfer, which is a photograph of my mom when she was in her 20s. I was raised in Miami, Florida. And I have attached medals because she was Catholic and very devoted to her parish church. So this is the first time that I've really become pretty personal in a deep way about my work. This one is called I Now Understand the Meaning of Life, which is also ink stain on raw canvas. These layers, it takes me a while because you can't determine the hue of the color until it is dry the next day before you apply the next layer. But this is called I Understand the Meaning of Life because right before my mom passed, we went to Egypt and my father. And she could read the hieroglyphics because she was a pharmacist. She wanted to go to medical school. And she was fascinated with the ankh. So you can see I stitched the ankh in there. I photo transferred one of the last photos of her before she died. And I stitched in the all-knowing eye, you know, which is very symbolic of Egyptian mythology. The next one I did is called Futility from Fakunda. And it's the same process. But on this one, I have a photo transfer of my mom in the drugstore in the area of the womb cavity. And what are attached are not Catholic metals on this one, but Mexican milagros. And milagros are very much used in Mexico, and people obtain them. They're like charms for wish fulfillment. And so on this particular one, I have a head of a woman, I have a heart, I have an angel, two angels actually, and I have a hand because she used her hand to mix up the pharmaceutical medicine for people, you know, during her career. These would have been shown in Germany, and I'm so happy that they're in by the people. The last one, not the last one, but the fourth one that was made for that is here. And this is called Birthright. And it's the same process, but instead of photo transferring the photo, I stitched it. And that's a picture of me holding my little cousin, because we're the next generation that has to demonstrate this unconditional love. And there are very old metals that are attached to this work. The last one is called Transformation. And that's the last one I made, and I started feeling a lot freer. I have a small dark photo of her, which was like the one of her professional headshots, and one medal. But this one is transformation because I feel like through the whole concept of oneness and unconditional love, we can truly be transformed. And this is one that's not in the show, that was in progress. I brought all this work from my studio and put it in here so you can see it. So what I've been working on during COVID, I've set up this living room, my living room, put everything out, and have been doing my work. And when I was working on the COVID, I went through a lot of changes, I guess, as everybody has. And I would call it the period of freeze, frozen, and thaw. I think I'm in the thaw period. When I couldn't go to Germany and do my show, everything just, you know, you're in they put you in a deep freezer. And then throughout this whole process of shutdown, I was isolated alone, and I felt frozen, but I had to examine myself. It forced you to look at yourself. And so I couldn't make any water angels. I couldn't do it. And the only one that I was finally able to do was this one. After I started with these portraits that I have been working on, that I call Corona Chronicle, My Shadow Side. And I wanted to come out of this whole thing differently. This is one called Insecurities. Quite different than the paddle dolls, but it was the only thing that I could handle during this period. And this is one called 9/11, which is a portrait of my son, which I consider 9/11 deals with police brutality of Black men and women, but parents are the 9/11 for their children. And we are the 9/11 for their children because we are there to protect them, and we are there to stand in the gap for them for emergencies. This one is called Incongruent. And these are done with charcoal and pastels. This is called Fear. This was the first one. This is pretty much how I felt. And one that I'm working on now that's in progress has no name, but she's not finished. So what this has brought me to, I will continue with the paddle dolls, but at this point, I have been thinking a lot about, examining the vacancies that this experience has left for me. And it's manifests itself in the loss of life, loss of friends, loss of things, loss of feelings, loss of situations. So I will continue making paddle dolls, but they will be for people that I have lost, people that have been killed, and I'm just gonna see where that leaves me. I'm working on one right now where I did drawings, and this is a study of a watercolor. This is the first person that died from COVID from me, was David Driscoll, and we lost a great person. And this is what I don't normally do. I went back to working in oil, and I'm working on this paddle doll for David. So that's what I've been up to.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I know when you said that you were working at home a few weeks ago, I didn't realize you brought your whole studio home. But I think everyone is I so appreciate you like sharing the close-ups of the paddle doll work, because I think seeing all of the elements and all of the texture and everything that has gone into them, from your soul to the actual materials is super important. And then sharing what you've been working on, because it's such a challenging time for everyone, but especially I think for artists. And it's so true that losing David Driscoll during this time period was a huge, deep loss for
it was a bit too much.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl. So when, I don't want to even ask because I don't think you started yet, but when do you think your studio is going to be up and running in your backyard?
You guys are going to have to probably a year. It's going to probably take me a year. I'm actually moving out of Brooklyn. I was there for 7 years, and I'm going to actually be moving out of there by the end of this month. And so I've been pulling all the pieces together to look at what do I need to do this. What I want to do, I have 467 square feet there, but I want a larger footprint. And so I think I can get it in my backyard. And so it's going to probably take a year to a year and a half. And so, but I'm very settled with that decision right now. It was a process. Trust me, it didn't happen easily.
Well, times of big transition and change for sure. But I'm happy to wait a year to see what your new space looks like. Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for taking us around your living room, your studio, sharing about your work, and being part of this festival. I'm sure you wish you were in Germany too, but being part of this festival, I think, feels like very much of the time. So we so appreciate you.
Oh, well, I was so thrilled to have the opportunity. I was very excited, and I'm so impressed on how you all have handled everything and all of the programming, given our environment. It's just a wonderful thing to be a part of, and I'm very honored.
Thanks, Cheryl. Well, and thank you everyone who has stuck around for these studio visits. To me, you know, I miss seeing everyone in DC and being out in the community, going on studio visits. And so, you know, during all of this time of quarantine and isolation, I think this is really the next best thing for me. So, like I said, there are only less than 4 more days left of By the People. We'll be having our last series of Instagram live talks tomorrow at noon. We have 4 artists, and we also slotted in an extra series of Instagram live talks at 4 p.m. tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. And then you have the rest of the weekend to think to. I know Chris sold another hand washing timer during this talk. So so yeah, add to your collection. People have a lot of blank walls that we're spending a lot of time looking at while we're staying in our homes. So, you know, create a space that you want to love and live with, collect local artists, because we all need support and new collectors at this time, and, you know, just ways to keep working and keep a livelihood and keep the DC community really, really vibrant. So again, appreciate everyone for being here today. Appreciate all of the artists who have given talks, and join us again tomorrow. And we'll see everyone very, very soon. Thank you.